Hi, good evening. This is Eric Moore. This is the November 25th meeting of the Town Meeting Study Committee. I'm the chair, we're Concord, and we're live. It's 7:02. Thank you everyone for joining. Tonight our clerk will be Chase Thompson. Thank you, Chase. And I'd like to go through and do roll. Keith Bergen, I see you.
Present.
Katie Bresnick, please.
Here.
Hi, Katie. Parashar Patel, please.
Here.
Good evening, Parashar. Chase, please. Chase Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. Eric Van Loon, please.
Present.
Phil Swain, please.
Here.
Eric Moore, present, and we are ready to go. We'll open with our agenda tonight, another full agenda. I'll try to move fairly quickly, actually. We'll have no meeting minutes to approve tonight. Just a couple of updates as chair. We'll talk about potential. We'll talk about home rule for remote participation. We'll talk about secret ballots, limited ballot recall versus the local ballot question stuff. We'll kind of skip through proxy voting because it won't work. and then Keith has prepared some material around spring and fall town meeting. And then finally, I'm going to reserve time to talk about our briefing to the select board a week from today. I'll open with public comment. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to make a comment of 2 minutes? Checking for raised hands, nobody in the room. Moving forward, thank you. No minutes to approve, moving forward. Chair's comments. So I hope we'll do some voting tonight. We'll see what the committee is ready for. We'll talk a little bit about what's going to go into the select board. Hey, Kristen Haggerty, I forgot to call your name for roll. But Kristen Haggerty is not present. And then, we've got coming up the select board in the second. Our next meeting 2 weeks from today, we'll go through what I hope to prepare for the league on the 13th. We'll talk about where we're at as a committee in terms of what our unknowns are and where we'd like to focus over the next few months. And then we'll be off until January 13th. Looking ahead a bit, I won't spend time on this. I think, we continue to invest in streamlining. Accessibility is a big theme for us, making it easier for people to participate. I think one of the things that I'm expecting to spend a lot of time on is communications and information. But we'll talk about, what our ideas are about for how we focus in January, February, and March when we meet again in December. A few comments about home rule petitions because I think they're underlying a few things that we're going to talk about tonight. This is my digest of what to think about with respect to home rule petitions. I think Eric in particular, Carmen, I think and Shannon too, actually better informed about this. But this is, I think the things that make a home rule petition work, that we can demonstrate broad community support, and that the folks who are going to be carrying the ball are engaged by that. So that in this case would be Senator Cataldo and Carmen.
Trenta.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say Giante anyway. So I think one thing that I've heard in talking about home rule is that really big visionary home rule petitions are really problematic to get through, and that the more concrete and incremental we can talk about a home rule petition, the better. A big change it's going to be more than just us. And so, in thinking about a potential big change or a potential big ask, I think we need to think about the beyond our community and multiple sponsors. And finally, they take time. Everybody's attention is limited. So my bottom line here is that we should really believe that a prospective home rule petition is a really solid, really good idea. So, and that's our judgment. So I should. Well, I think one of the questions that we're going to ask, I think several times tonight, is: do we need to move to rule things out, or simply move not to invest? So, on some topic, do we need to go, no, we're not going to do that, or is it simply a matter of choosing where we spend our additional attention on as a committee? I'll just skip over this actually because it's my point of view, and I think I want to see what the committee thinks. So moving on to the next agenda item, and again, I see no one from the public So the business around remote participation in voting. Here's a potential motion. I don't know if folks have read through the packet, and if they need to read it out loud, but I'd like to open discussion on the question of where do we stand with a potential home rule petition for remote participation in voting. Do we feel that we're ready to make a vote? Do we feel that we want to talk about it more? I'll just go around the table and then we'll go through online. Keith, where are you at this point?
I'm philosophically okay with the idea of remote participation for open town meeting. I think it is superior to the proposal of basically foregoing decisions at town meeting and handing them off to an electorate at the ballot. That is the other home rule petition that we're asked to do. I think this one is superior to that one. I think this one someday may pass. I just don't know when someday is. And I know that Concord won't be the entity that figures out what the technology is and make it happen and viable. But when somebody does, we ought to be ready to jump on that bandwagon.
Good, thank you. Just going around the room, if that's okay, Eric, please.
I strongly favor and endorse the idea of our moving to provide remote participation. It is a long process, and I think we want to underscore to citizens that it's not something we can do with a wave of the wand. But more citizens in our survey responded to that question, 100%, 98%. Then
Not quite that high, yeah, but
it was 98%
responded to
the question.
I see.
And of those, it was a 4-to-1 vote. It was 80-20 of people in favor. In addition to that, second, we had I think more articulated comments in the 60 pages of citizen comments on that than almost any other. And I found many of those very persuasive and strong.
Yeah.
And third, in our hearings and in our discussion, and citizens have come here, there's been strong support. And on the other hand, I had not picked up strong articulations against it at all. Some that, a couple hundred people on the survey said no, they would not favor it, but the comparison to me, it's not even close. And based on all of that, I'm prepared to offer a motion later in the meeting that we strongly urge the select board to move immediately toward that, not waiting for 2025 town meeting.
Yeah, so we'll actually come back to that. I think there's a procedural point around that maybe you were already on top of, but we'd like to come back to that. Good, thank you. Thank you. Carmen, we'll skip over you and then we'll come back to you and to Cameron. That's all right.
I'm wondering, did I understand you, Eric, to say you think they should get working on it and not wait till town meeting? Is that what you said?
That's correct.
Okay, you can't, because you need a town meeting vote in order to support a petition to the legislature for home rule.
So that's the procedural plan.
Yeah.
So if I could finish the thought was that there's a lot of things that they can do right away, such as instructing town council to look at the actual wording, such as working with David Allen, David Carr, or otherwise to reach out to other towns and say we're actively pursuing this, so that, I mean, we have the latest town meeting this year than we've had in a long, long time. If everything that we have done up to now, we've grossly, incompetently misunderstood the pulse of the community. And the vote were to go down in flames at town meeting or not be adopted, well, anything that's been done can be put on hold.
So,
But my fundamental thing is it's a long and multi-year process This is something where we've really heard strongly from the citizenry. And since it is a long time, that it makes sense to go ahead and get started now and not wait until June, next summer to
Mhm.
take the first steps. So that's my approach, or why I think that the select board can take a number of steps, waiting for the formal vote. But again, it's not as if the state legislature either.
Okay, Eric, thank you. I want to come back to,
I'd like to address this procedural point
when we come
have
back
that.
to it, yeah. I think it's a fair question, but I want to keep going and get the committee's temperature on.
Because I think he's
Sure.
right, but for a different reason.
Good.
That none of the, oftentimes the work, home rule, an article that says file a home rule petition and doesn't write and doesn't contain in the article exactly what the home rule petition is not a home rule petition. So if we're serious about having any home rule petition, so the administration has got to task town council to write the damn thing and bring that to the voters, and not an amorphous idea that doesn't have language, so.
Good, thank you. Phil, what are your thoughts on this, please?
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll come,
okay.
we
that's
have
what
a lot to talk about this.
First thought is I'd like to hear what.
Okay.
A diplomat.
Go ahead.
I think that, I don't, fundamentally, I don't have, any problem with remote participation. There is only one community in Massachusetts with open town meeting, that has sought home rule authority to have, remote participation, and that's Wayland.
Mhm.
Their proposal is not fleshed out.
No,
I did in passing have a conversation with Simon Cataldo
Mhm.
about the notion of home rule.
Right.
He was pretty clear that it would be important for any communities advancing the same idea for home rule
Right.
authority would be best advised to be tracking the same language.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't feel the urgency that Eric Finley does, and that's because I think that my guess is it'll be a decade before
Hmm.
the legislature acts on this, if it ever does. And I think that we don't now know what the technology is that would support
Hmm.
remote voting for as many as 14,000 registered voters.
Mhm.
I'm not aware of a platform that wouldn't crash. And a platform that would securely check people in and register their votes. So the technological issues and the security issues are unsolved.
Sure,
But that doesn't mean that one can't begin the process of engaging the legislature in the conversation and the process of joining perhaps a group of communities that are thinking about this and looking at how do you answer those questions? How do you answer the technology and the security, and the management questions?
Yeah.
So.
good, thank you. Phil Swain, please.
So, 3 points. First of all, I would support Eric's proposal or proposed motion that he said, for the reasons Eric said and for the reasons that Keith said. I think we should get going as soon as possible. I understand that the technology isn't there, there's a lot of details, but I don't see any reason for us to slow this, take it slow. We should get the ball rolling as soon as possible, including before town meeting. Second, and that's so we have something concrete and fleshed out when we go to town meeting. Second, I think we should work with Wayland to flesh out whatever it is, and any other towns that are doing this. And I understand that Wayland has submitted its petition, but there are other towns that are also considering it, and we should work with them. Frankly, I think Concord should take the lead since we're supposedly the model town meeting. And then finally, maybe that's only 2 points, but that's I guess what I want to say.
Good,
Support
thank
the
you,
passage. Yeah.
thank you. Kristen Haggerty, please.
I support moving towards the home rule petition. I don't see the same urgency. I guess I'm more aligned with kind of Carmen's caution about it, primarily because I want to make sure that our recommendation falls in line with the priorities of the select board and everything, and the, money that we're allotted for different things like that, but I think we can work out those details in the discussion.
Good, thank you. I'm gonna go online to Katie, then Chase, then Parashar, and then finally Cameron. Katie, please.
Yep, I also support the home rule petition. I also feel the urgency that some others are expressing. I think that going to remote will be kind of essential for the survival of town meeting into the future. And without that, I just don't know how this form of meeting persists for many, many years, as it's very challenging to engage younger folks, parents, et cetera, on the current model. So I think we should pursue that ASAP. I agree with Eric's comment about educating the community that is not something we're allowed to do, like continuing to educate folks on that point. That's why we're not doing it, is because we're not allowed to do it right now, and not because it's just an antiquated model and we just have chosen not to. But in the interim, given that this could be a long process, we also need to find some stopgap solutions still that will be able to allow people like myself to attend, which seems like those are hard to find. So this is really important to me.
Good, thank you, Katie. Chase, please.
I think Katie said it well. I don't have much to add to that.
Great, thank you. Parashar, please.
And Phil and perhaps Katie, I do
Your
think,
audio is garbled, Parashar.
is that better?
Yeah,
Yep, so I'm with Phil and with Eric. I do think we should urge the select board to go ahead and start preparations for having a vote in the annual town meeting, and I actually do think it would be helpful to start laying the groundwork, frankly, talking to other towns, seeing what the potential articles could look like that we would be comfortable as a town supporting. I'm not sure it makes any sense to wait until June to start those preparations.
good, thank you. Cameron McKenna, please.
Yeah, thanks. I'm in agreement. Let's move it forward. Let's get started. You got to start somewhere. Let's get after it. Let's do what we can before town meeting. Let's see what we can bring to town meeting. And, I know it's going to take a while, but you got to start somewhere. So I'm all in.
Good, thank you. Scott Gillis, so let me think for a second. I want to ask the question, is the language, so there are two parts to this, right? First of all, there's a language of the motion that we move to approve, and we can draft of the motion here. So the second piece will be, how does our committee, what do we ask the select board in terms of beginning this process, if in fact we're going to vote for this? What do we ask the select board? But let me go to Scott Gillis online, because it looks as though you'd like to make a comment.
Yes, thank you very much, Eric, and good evening, everybody. I and Mark Martinez were co-sponsors of the Article 28, approving or authorizing the select board to pursue a home rule petition at the last meeting. David Allen and David Carr were very involved in that as well, and there were many people who signed that petition. Carmen was very helpful to all of us as we worked to prepare that document. Thanks to Carmen, that document contained very specific language modeled after Wayland in an effort to make it as easy as possible for the select board to proceed had it been approved at town meeting 2024. So my understanding, based on Carmen's guidance 6 months ago, more than 6 months ago, was that this is I don't want to say a checking the box exercise, but the home rule petition cannot be pursued without authorizing the select board to do so at town meeting. So if this petition is nothing more than authorizing the select board, I think we want to make it as easy as possible for the select board, number one. And number two, make it as likely as possible to pass. And my sense is that will take a lot of early preparation. So I'm delighted to hear all of the comments in favor of doing the homework, so to speak, beginning now.
Good.
There was one thing that was said a couple of times, and I just want to ask what the source of the viewpoint is. And that is the technology is not currently available. And I'm wondering what data exists to support the view that technology is not currently available to do it today.
So Scott, I recognize your comment there. I don't want to spend time on it tonight. I don't know that it's material in terms of our reading the room. So I think so first of all, let's come back. I'd like to discuss this motion, see if this motion's about basically, do we agree to go to the select board to say, hey, we want to put something on the warrant? Is the wording of this motion correct for that ask? Do we need to make any changes to this motion?
I'd like to offer a substitute motion, which I emailed to Shannon so she could put it up, and also to you, Mr. Chairman. It says the town meeting study committee strongly endorses allowing remote participation in Concord town meeting and urges the select board to take immediate steps to begin developing and submitting a home rule petition to make this legally possible. And then goes on to say the immediate steps could include instructing town council to recommend draft wording and reaching out to other towns to present a multi-jurisdictional petition. The select board should also sponsor and promote, or we recommend that the select board sponsor and promote the warrant article at the 2025 town meeting.
So what you've done, if I interpret you correctly, is to bundle in the follow-on action. I mean, we're asking one thing, we want to get something on the warrant. And you're also asking the select board, you're saying you also want the select board to start doing something.
I think it's also an important difference in tone, which is strongly endorse and take immediate steps. It's not just, well, we think it's a nice idea out there. And I think that there's an important element here for the credibility of this committee and our process. I mean, we have heard from a lot of citizens who feel strongly about this and who I think make a very strong case that in this day and age, with requirements of parenting and business travel and all the rest, that only limiting participation to people who can make it does functionally disenfranchise a bunch of people who care. And that I think it behooves us to really say we hear and acknowledge that concern of citizens. And I agree, I think it was Phil who said, over the long haul, if there's not, there has to be, for town meeting to remain viable, I believe that over the long haul, there has to be some fundamental structural changes. And I think that this is, people have become so familiar and effective in participating in things like Zoom, that it's more us catching up to the societal norm rather than being pioneering. And the last thing that I would say, and this goes to the issue of where the technology is, let's have those two things go in parallel. not go for the town rule petition and then, work on the technology. We all know getting it through the legislature is gonna take several years. And that's several years when, again, I think that the technology is more likely to be enhanced if whoever's spending the money and all to develop it knows, hey, there's a bunch of people, there's a market there that is developed.
Sure. So I want to come back to this motion. Thank you.
I second his motion.
So the motion that we would vote on would be here in the orange. Do we want both paragraphs for that? Immediate
In the
steps for
orange?
entry? Yeah,
I second both parts. I don't think we should get into some of the language in the bottom part. Seeking to grant Concord the right to remote participation. Because what we're really doing is asking the state legislature to change town meeting law. They don't do that for just one town, sometimes they do. But it's really, over the 400 years that we've been having town meetings
right.
in Massachusetts, those have all evolved, and this is another evolution, just like maybe, in 1630, they changed the law to allow, or some year they changed the law to allow women, and so on. So this is like that. And so it's not really asking for Concord in particular. Asking it to be legally possible is okay, but asking it for the purposes of Concord isn't what we're really looking for. We're
So,
asking for a change in state law.
Why aren't we using the motion that was on last year's warrant from Scott Gillis? But
That's what they
We
would,
put on the warrant. This
what
is-
they would put on the
so
warrant.
you're just saying a recommendation. we're
This is
making
what
for-
our, the action that our
I just
committee
wanna make sure
takes.
we're,
Yeah.
we're,
Yeah,
so what we would be asking is for the select board to move it,
yes.
as opposed to
Yeah.
a citizen petition or this committee.
Well, two things, right?
I'm not hearing that in this motion.
Well, that's,
I-
I
Looking at
wanna make
something else.
sure when we say motion,
If we just struck home rule petition, then we're not seeking to have our Concord town meeting vote to submit a home rule petition for Concord that someone drafts. So we know what it says, that instead we're gonna support a statewide effort to pass a general law that allows open town meetings in Massachusetts to do it, which I like. I like that approach. I think it's a sounder approach than any one community going it alone, because the technology answer will not have to satisfy Concord officials. It will have to satisfy state officials. So the question of what, does the technology work or not? Well, we don't need to have an opinion on it, because our opinion will be meaningless when it comes to the state, who is the sole determiner of what election law will govern. They will instruct the cities and towns what is a viable technical solution to this problem. But it is a problem that is going to get solved at some point. And I would applaud Concord's efforts to get involved in the statewide coalition to have so that any open town meeting, a local option, or any open town meeting could opt to have a hybrid town meeting. I think that's a laudable goal, and it sort of focuses an effort that might actually succeed, rather than just a Concord home rule petition, which would have a higher likelihood of failure.
And
So-
as a point of information,
Eric,
the
can I make
wording
a
of
suggestion?
Yeah,
the wording of.
excuse me, Eric. Yes, Parashar?
I think we're discussing something here that can easily be solved with an edit. I agree that we should include the language here, but I would suggest that we take that strike out and just modify it slightly, that I think would address people's concerns about what this is. And I would simply say, we ask the select board to put an article on the town meeting 25 warrant authorizing a home rule petition seeking to grant Concord and other towns the right to pilot remote participation and voting for open town meetings. So it mentions Concord, it acknowledges that it's for other towns. And I think that addresses this concern that, you know, they're not gonna do it only for Concord. And with respect to the technology, I mean, look, I think everybody acknowledges this is not gonna happen. The state's not gonna allow this to happen overnight. It's gonna take 3 to 5 years. Whether the technology is ready now or not, in 3 to 5 years, I am very confident it'll be ready. So for us to try to figure out whether it's ready and what the state of the technology is right now, I think we should move past that with all due respect.
Good, thank you. Cameron McKenna, I'd like to go to you. What is the most instrumental speech coming from us for the select board on this topic?
Well,
What do you guys
yeah.
need to hear?
Well, again, I think it's, you know, to me, it's just about communicating the intent. So I appreciate trying to get the wording exactly right, but I'm not sure, because this isn't actually what's going to actually get written is the warrant for town meeting, that's where the wording needs to be really
Right.
precise. So I'm a little more relaxed, like it's just about communicating the intent. Hey, look, here's what the committee said. Here's what we're recommending. We want you to go, hey, select board, we want you to go do this. We want you to start
Right.
now, and we want you to do something where you can partner with other towns and, you know, get something on the warrant that's going to allow us to do the home rule petition.
Yeah, so good, thank you.
If I could just add
I want you to
point of
wait, please.
information.
would like you to wait, please. Thank you. So there's the question of, hey, we want to do this, and there's a question of how do we proceed, right? With what urgency do we proceed? What issues do we address? What's the scope of the action that Concord is taking? And who's going to own that? Now, you know, I think a question for the select board is, does the select board feel it will need to own the project? Is this something that over the next 4 to 5 months, our committee will drive? I think that discussion is one that we need to have. Where's the center of this gonna be? So I don't have an answer for that, and I don't know that the committee is prepared to answer that tonight. To me, it's, hey, we wanna do this, and then the question is, how do we do it? Good, thank you.
The point of information that I thought would help people to know is that the wording of the actual petition that's submitted by Wayland is, differs in only 2 words from what the citizen petition language, was put forth, last year. And both of those are general, and they're really crafted to be able to be picked up and endorsed by other towns. So I think while it's possible the town council would come up with a different idea, we're probably fairly close on what the language would be.
Good, okay, thank you. So at this point then, so I'll include in the report, to the interim report, a copy of the motion from last year, the copy of the sensible petition from last year. So that way we can begin moving the ball in that direction. Good, thank you. So we have a motion then. It's the text in orange and the text in black below it. Are we okay with this motion? Or are we ready to vote on this motion, or is there some change?
I don't think we should have a second paragraph. The second paragraph is too specific in telling what the select board what to do. And I don't think we need to do that at this point. If we just ask them to take immediate steps to begin developing and submitting a home rule petition, that's enough. In the second one, we're telling them to put a home rule petition, to submit one. And we also, I've never liked the words to pilot, because I don't understand what that means.
It means we don't really know how it's gonna work.
Well, I understand, but it doesn't mean try,
Yeah,
or try it for 1 year, that sort of thing. It's a new age word that I don't understand.
okay,
And so I think you should keep the language as simple and as brief as possible.
It's a sales word that makes it more palatable to the legislature.
If
let me recognize Keith and then Parash.
If I could on that, there are 2 examples of pilot that have been applied to Concord by the legislature. First is that we are one of the 10 communities, part of a pilot project allowing only those 10 communities to implement fossil fuel-free development bylaws that can get approved by the Attorney General, because there's a general law that was passed that allowed 10 communities, and we're one of the 10. That was a pilot. Secondly, we tried and failed to get a pilot program for the real estate transfer fee. So that it was a proposal that was offered by Rep. Gentile, which ultimately failed and was not included in the Affordable Homes Act, but there was an attempt to have Concord be one of a select few involved in it. So I think the approach is the legislature sometimes allows a select few communities to do something new rather than open it up.
I don't wanna
That's
be a
all.
stickler. I mean, those are pilot, then the first one you use is a noun, the second one is an adjective. This is a verb, and I just don't know what to pilot means. Does it mean to try it, to experiment with it, etc.? And I just don't think it's necessary, because all we have to do is just ask them to start working on this.
Good, fair enough, Phil, thank you. So now we have one paragraph. I think simple is, the argument is simpler. Let me go to Parashar and then I'll go to you, Kristen.
Yeah, again,
Parashar,
you know,
please.
I don't want to wordsmith to this too much, but I'm okay with the one paragraph, but I would seriously ask us to make sure that we're actually asking the select board to have something on the town meeting warning. The way it's written, they could take their time and be 2 years. So I would
Right.
at least urge us to put something in there around a warrant for a town meeting 2025.
What if we just added comma, including, submitting and sponsoring a, 2025 town meeting warrant article?
Okay, I'll clean this up.
I think it's relevant that you put the part about sponsoring. I think the questions that the select board are gonna have for us are, what does it mean to take immediate, what are those immediate steps you want us to take? And also a reminder that this committee reports to Carmen and to town meeting, and we're not directly reporting to the select board. I'm just saying that's what I have heard on multiple occasions, so just making sure we're prepared to address that notion.
So, including submitting a warrant article, on behalf of the TMSC. Does that cover that, Kristen?
That
Yes.
makes us the sponsors.
Yeah,
We want them.
I
to
think
be
he's
sponsors.
asking the select board to sponsor it, which would make it more clear if that's what we're asking.
Yeah.
And then they can choose not to and say, well, it's really the study committee that
Yeah.
should be doing that, but I think that's what we're requesting.
All right,
Well, why don't we make it either or, including a, TM 25 warrant article that could be submitted by the select board or the TMSC or both.
And I mean, we'll be
I don't think
discussing
it's
this
worth-
particular thing in just in another week or two,
Right.
right? So we can clarify it. So I mean, I think we're all in agreement that we wanna help get that our recommendation is consistent, and then I think discussion in another week will help to further clarify that.
Parashar, your hand is down now, okay. So, I'd like to vote then on this motion as worded in orange.
I'd like to ask our appointing authority whether this committee has whether it would be within our scope to draft the article for this and then have the select board insert it on the warrant. Or we should recommend that the select board draft the article and that they put it on the warrant. Or are we overstepping our charge by saying that it's an either or, either we put it on the warrant, because we don't have standing to put it on.
I thought the original intent was to have the select board submit. So why not just say legally possible, including sponsoring and submitting TM 25 warrant article, period. So that's really the select board doing this.
Period.
They're the elected body. They need to take responsibility.
Yeah, and if they balk, we can decide, we can debate whether we have the authority to
Okay,
submit our own warrant.
Carmen, I'd like to recognize you, please.
Just in response to the authority question, I think this committee is charged with making recommendations, and the recommendations can be general or specific. And if the recommendation is it can be more general, we think should proceed with a home rule petition for remote voting, full stop. Or it can be, we think, an article that looks like this should be put in the warrant. Stop there.
Okay,
Either way.
Right, and my only question is that I don't believe that this committee has the authority to insert an article onto a town meeting warrant.
This committee does not have the authority to put things on the warrant. However, you can certainly propose articles to go on the warrant, and then it will be up to the select board whether to include those articles on the warrant.
okay, good. So are we prepared as a committee? Katie, I'll recognize you in just a second. I'm sorry. Are we prepared as a committee to work with the select board, moving this issue forward?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can say that. The TMSC is prepared to work with the select board on this. Katie, did you have something? I'm sorry.
No, I was just actually gonna suggest the same thing Parashard was.
Okay. Is prepared. Sorry, I can't type.
Nothing like screen sharing when you gotta
Yeah, let's see. Okay, close enough. Okay, let's take a vote on this more or less as worded.
And we have a motion in a second.
Do we have a motion in a second? for
I
this?
seconded Eric's
Motion,
motion.
second.
Good. Let's see, we'll go through online first. Chase, please.
Aye. Yes.
Thank you. Parashar Patel, please.
Aye.
Thank you. Katie Bresnick, please.
Aye.
Thank you. And that is everyone online. We do not have Alice tonight. To my left, Keith Burton, please.
Aye.
Eric Van Loon, please.
Aye.
Phil Swain, please.
Yes.
Kristen Haggerty, please.
Aye.
And Eric Moore, aye. Okay, so moved. Yay. All right, never so easy, huh?
44.
Yes, all right, so secret ballot. I don't know what the motion should be here. We talked a little bit about this last time about a potential motion. I had a conversation with Alice Kaufman. I said, basically, let's think about this. Let's not overreach in terms of what it is that we're gonna vote on or move for. So I don't know what the motion should be. I'm asking the committee, how do we want to approach this? Please.
And on what basis are we making this recommendation? Like, in other words, this wasn't one of the kind of the three things that were on the warrant last year.
Yeah.
We added this, so.
Yeah, we added this, and in fact, I added this, right? I thought, you know, if one of the drivers for using clickers is privacy, how do we really feel about the secret ballot? Because, you know, if we chose that all ballots shouldn't be secret, then that's affects our rationale for clickers. If we chose that all ballots should be secret, or preferably secret, then it affects our rationale as well. So to your point, sort of Alice's point as well, we just approved clickers. So is there, you know, it's a little bit circular, but is there benefit to making a motion directly on the prospect of a private voter secret ballot now?
I think that would be forcing it down the moderator's throat. And forcing it down the town meeting's throat. If we say all ballots should be private, or even preferably private, we put approved clickers. And presumably, the moderator would use them for private ballots. But we haven't said all ballots should be private. I don't think that's what people are clamoring for.
Sure, so in this language here, then, you would see D or E as what the motion we should be voting on.
No changes needed is what I think is what we should do. And with no changes needed, I don't think we even should have a motion on it.
That's what I was wondering. Right, there's an existing way to advocate for a secret ballot.
Mhm.
But what I think what you're saying is like, this would make it explicit, you know, to accompany our discussion about clickers, right?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
I have again, a motion I'm willing to offer.
Let me get back to you then. Parashar, could I get your comment, please?
Yeah, I think this discussion, frankly, and hopefully nobody takes offense at this, encapsulates the perspective people have of town meeting. I think if you ask the folks that submitted the survey, 90% of them or more probably don't even know that there's a process to ask for a secret ballot that would afford privacy. And so at the end of the day, I think what I interpreted from people's comments were, hey, I don't like to raise my hand because everybody can see them. And Clickers addresses that. And so by us trying to parse this out into privacy versus Clickers and having this conversation gets at the heart of what makes town meeting frustrating for a lot of folks. Frankly, we can adopt Clickers and the need to actually ask for a private vote with Clickers goes away. So I don't know why we've got to opine on this notion of whether we like this notion of people being able to ask for privacy when we could just move on to the underlying issue, which is the Clickers.
Well, you don't have to, thank you. You don't have to use the clickers for every vote. I mean, I think we haven't stipulated that. I don't really see us stipulating that.
Well,
But
I
That
agree.
seems
So
that's what they're
I,
asking for.
Eric,
with the
no,
first-
I
Well, I
agree.
mean,
I see a menu.
we're figuring out what we're gonna vote on, right? I mean, if we were to vote on A, that would entail using clickers for everything, right? But we're gonna, as a committee, choose on what we're gonna vote on. So
Yeah, and I guess the way other towns do it, at least according to some of the surveys I read, is they leave it up to the moderator. And we could either do that, or we can just do A. And, the clicker idea, some people say says it saves money, some people says it doesn't, time, et cetera. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know that we've got to get into the underlying rationale. So much as say, hey, we think clickers are a good way to provide privacy, may or may not save time, may or may not save money, but at the end of the day, we think overall, it's the best way to go. Do it for all votes and we move on. I mean, we're just making a mountain out of a molehill, in my perspective.
So what I hear you saying is forget about secret ballot or whatever and just make a motion around clickers if we feel we want to use clickers more than just on discretion.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Katie, please.
I agree completely with Parashar. I think that, leaving it up to discretion provides another place for people to be dissatisfied. And if we're waiting for people to ask for a secret ballot, we're just gonna pay for clickers and never use them, which I don't think makes a lot of sense. And I think if we're being forward looking and hoping that remote voting is eventually a thing, we will almost definitely have to use clickers or some other electronic way of voting. So I think of this as the first step in heading in that direction. And doing any of these options other than just all votes are now with clickers, it gets a little bit, I think, wishy-washy. And I think we should just go with all votes on clickers.
So what I hear then, Katie, you and Parashar are saying is use clickers as much as possible. Or just use clickers.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think folks were complaining about the consent agenda. Right? And so if you want to raise your hand for consent agenda, great. But at the end of the day, clickers can be just as fast. I mean, why bother sort of then having controversy on individual issues of whether to use a clicker or not? Just go forward.
All right, thank you. Let me go to Cameron McKenna, please.
I think Katie and Parashar said, I'm gonna lower my hand. I agree with them on what they said.
All right, thank you. I see Eric Van Loon here and then Keith President.
Yeah, to be clear, it is completely within the discretion of the moderator to do this or not to do this. But second, as Carmen said a little while ago, part of the purpose of having this committee is to think about things and make recommendations, which can be adopted or not. Third, I do think that so my motion would be that we recommend the adoption of electronic clickers for voting at town meeting. And there's at least sort of a bigger philosophical and then a more practical. The philosophical one is, I think, and again, 84% of the people who responded to, of 1,000 people that responded to our survey, it was 84 to 16, 84% said yes to electronic clickers. Second, for me, there becomes an issue. And elsewhere in our survey, I think it's like 27, 28% said they didn't like having to vote in public. And at some point, the earlier it was 30%, I think, in the 1996 town meeting. I mean, when you have a significant number of voters saying, I don't want to participate, or the town employees who wrote in and said, I don't come to town meeting because I'm a resident, but I'm not comfortable coming and voting. I think when you have a significant number like that, then that's something to think hard about, and at least the way I come down on that is let's endorse electronic voting. The practical thing, that was the philosophical thing. The practical thing is that I think that we've gotten from multiple dimensions people's frustration, the sense that the meetings don't go as quickly and smoothly and efficiently as everybody would like. And I think, to my mind at least, this is one of a bunch of different things that could be done if just sort of automatically, when it's time to vote, you do, everybody pushes yes or no, and you have 30 seconds, and it's just done. And then people have the sense that we're moving quickly, and they know how to do it. You don't have to stop and say, okay, on this one, we're gonna have an electronic ballot, whereas on that one we didn't. And now, as a reminder for everybody, with the electronic ballot, here's what you do, and you hold up and you push this, and I think if it just becomes a normal part of town meeting, it contributes to certainly to the sense of efficiency. In addition to honoring the philosophy, I think, secrecy is a loaded word, privacy is a loaded, I mean, words matter. But I think honoring people's desire to participate as fully as they can, we should, that's part of what we wanted, was to increase participation.
Thank you. So you said people wanted clickers, right? So we gave them clickers, so to speak, right? We said that we support the use of clickers at town meeting. We know clickers, literally are good for a couple of things. Symbolically, they're have appeal in terms of we have clickers now. Do we want to stipulate as a committee how to use clickers? Or do we want to leave it to the meeting to use clickers? What I hear you saying is, let's just stipulate it. Let's change meeting to use clickers.
Do we have information? I know that 20 or so other towns around us use them. And I know that at least one of them, they use it only part of the time. Do we know? I think that most of the towns, when I went to Wayland town meeting
they use it for
decades ago,
everything.
they use it for everything. It's just a normal hard bang.
Carlisle doesn't use it for everything.
Right.
So for example,
Yeah.
so do we as a committee want to stipulate the use of clickers, how clickers are used in town meeting?
I personally, that would be my vote.
Okay.
So
As a recommendation.
I disagree. So I think we make it that much harder for the town to go along with clickers. There's a number of people who say transparency, like that's the important thing to them. So if they think it's not gonna be transparent because clickers are used all the time, they're gonna be fighting the clickers. And I think we wanna just use it as the bottom line. Use clickers when clickers are needed or desired. Leave it up to the moderator, but also to the meeting. Somebody can move for a private vote, and if there is a motion for a private vote, then clickers get used. I mean, I understand a lot of people don't read the rules and everything, but it's pretty clear that there is a procedure for asking for a private vote. So rather than force it down the meeting's throat and possibly generate some opposition from the transparency crowd, let's just make it optional for now, so that everybody will go along with Clippers as a tool. That's all, it's an optional tool. And by the way, the moderator could evolve so that he or she says, we're gonna have clickers all the time, like they do in Wayland. Because maybe that's the right thing, but it also, I think, a combination hybrid is the fastest, because the moderator can get a sense, just raise your ballots, because it's gonna be unanimous.
Less than 20
They're
seconds.
unanimous.
Yeah.
And that's faster than even waiting for the 30 seconds for a clicker. So, I just think we make it optional,
Mhm.
until at least we get them in. And then maybe we can decide later,
Good,
or somebody can decide later to make them mandatory.
thank you. Parashar, please?
I would actually prefer the reverse. I mean, the transparency comments I got, yes, there were people that wanted to see each other's votes. But I think there was more notion around transparency around the content of what is happening. People didn't know what got decided when, et cetera. I would prefer that we just go in and ask that clickers be used all the time. If town meeting objects to that, somebody can stand up and make a motion to say only at the moderator's discretion. But again, I go to what, I won't repeat everything that Eric said, but we should just make it a habit. So that way there's no disruption, people need to be explained about what to do, et cetera. It just becomes norm.
Thank you. Why do we decide that, not the moderator?
I'm sorry,
Why do we decide that and not the moderator?
we're making
The
the
moderators will ask for a recommendation.
recommendation, and the town meeting and the moderator can ignore our recommendation.
Fair enough.
Sure. I think there is one other factor, and that is there is an expense to this. And if you're only using it on 10% of the votes, that maybe makes it seem a bigger deal to spend the money. Whereas if it becomes sort of a normal part, that makes it seem, and of course, there was the suggestion, and I don't know how practical it is or whatever, what if several towns buy the things and make sure they don't have town meeting on the same time, so they share the
That's not
equipment.
our business though, right? I mean,
No, but cost is an issue that has always
absolutely.
come up.
Yeah.
And it's small in comparison to the total cost of town meeting.
Right.
But
But
every dollar.
it's still material. And here, sorry, I'm a little warm tonight. I think still, it's an issue of what do we think meetings should do? Not how does it get done, but what should it do? So Keith, please.
Yeah, I know we don't have minutes from the last meeting, but I thought we took a vote on clickers.
We took a vote on
And
clickers, yeah.
and can someone remind us what the vote was? Because my feeling is we've already taken 2 votes now on things which some could say, hey, you're in favor of privacy. Good, that you heard what we said. We said, okay to clickers, and for the long term, we're saying we're okay with people sitting at home and voting on their computers and no one else seeing what the vote is. So we're okay with that. We're okay with technology improving the operation of town meeting. I think that's all we need to say about that, and that we don't need to say, therefore, we're in favor of privacy all the time, or we're not. And I do think that both of that the clicker argument, is my understanding, it's couched as a matter that would be up to the discretion of the town moderator to use, and the town staff to figure out how to procure the clickers.
I think that the motion last month or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Was that it wasn't prescribing clickers on
We
everything.
believe it may improve meeting.
Yeah, but it wasn't saying how.
Right, we think both the clickers and the remote participation will improve town meetings and
Well,
and make people happier, I guess, so, until they see the outcomes of the votes.
Yeah, Kristen, please.
and to clarify, what I'm hearing us say is there's a minority of people for whom this would make a difference. And, it might not materially affect the other people for whom they didn't say they wanted it different. So I just wanna make sure we're saying that we're trying to survey a minority of people by recommending a change by which they can vote electronically. We are going to have a report, and I think in the report is where we should definitely detail the discussion that we had around this and the difference between, it's not that I'm looking at how you vote, that's not what it is, we're not, like, I couldn't tell you how the people around me necessarily voted or who they were all the time. But I think it's the concept, the philosophy of, I'm voting as part of my community. And, you know, my voice is being heard and I need to think about how my vote impacts other people. So I imagine that will go into our final report, whether people probably won't read it until, the next time they do this, study or other, you know, folks do the study, but the reason I'm mentioning the minority is because sometimes people think we only do things in favor of what the majority of people want to do. And although 84% said they wanted to use clickers, we think, I guess we are surmising that that's because they thought it was faster. So I guess my only hope is that, as a result of our changes and because we know they're not necessarily causal, we evaluated the survey when they leave, you know, how was their satisfaction with the meeting and to see if it affects attendance.
Mhm.
So,
We keep learning in other words.
well, yeah,
And I'm basing partly on the 275 people in the survey who clicked, who said, I am uncomfortable voting when my vote is not private.
So
Could I offer just one thing? I think that both of our votes right now also reflect a value that we have, and that is that we're committed to open town meeting. And we want more, and we recognize open town meeting participants are self-selected, and we are trying to remove barriers so that more people can self-select to participate in open town meeting by making it more comfortable for them to do that. If using a clicker does it, fine. If doing remotely is fine. We're looking to be able to include more people, and so that, I think that's a common thread for what we're doing.
good, thank you.
Well put.
So actually, I'd forgotten to do this slide. This is what I want us to conclude. So if we agree to this, there is a place for secret ballots at town meeting. We have that. It's not in our charter, but it's certainly our policy. It should be easy for voters to move for a secret ballot. I think it's a little hard right now when a secret ballot means we have to spend another 45 minutes of meeting. Conduct of the secret ballot should not be appreciably slower than voting with paper slips. There is currently a provision for secret balloting that may not meet that threshold of the two previous points. Clickers are the best implementation of the secret ballot, and they take the time penalty away for a motion for a secret ballot. For guidance and moderation, for the moderator, you know, we prefer rule of meeting rather than a binding policy about use of clickers or secret ballots. Let the people decide how they want the moderator to run the meeting. So that's, you know, that's what I would like to see us vote on or agree on. Are we close to that? Eric, you want something more binding than that?
Well, you say at the bottom, our motion, I mean, I view that as an excellent articulation of a lot of the considerations behind this.
Good.
But then what we've been asked to do is take considerations, think about it, discuss it, hear from
Right.
citizens, but then make the recommendation. So
Right.
to me, all that boils down to a recommendation that we recommend the use of electronic clicker voting devices at Concord Town meeting.
We've already done that. So are we done here?
So I don't think we need a motion on secret ballots.
Okay.
I think we're there. I think we're there. I
Yeah.
think we're,
Yeah.
the motions that we took reflect the value of that I mentioned of including more people. So
Right.
that point made.
And does this parsimonious view, get you in a second, Parashar, does this parsimonious view represent the view of the committee? Parashar, please?
Yeah, no, I think my question was just answered, because I missed last week's meeting or the previous meeting. It appeared we already voted on a motion for the use of clickers, and if so, I think we don't need a motion on this so much as it gets implemented in, you mentioned it in the report, so why we're recommending the clickers.
Yeah, this is good for the report.
Okay, good. So I think we're done with this item then. We've basically discussed it in some detail. You need to weigh in?
I'll just note that, town staff is already looking at, securing electronic voting. It's tricky because, that was not a factor in the budget when it was passed last year.
Mhm.
So, and the budget is very, very tight, so we just have to figure out how to make it work within, the existing budget for town meeting.
Yeah, so just to follow up on it, thank you, Carmen. Just to follow up on that, Amalia McCaffrey, who's the interim CIO, is preparing a report that that the select board will discuss as part of our time, next week at the select board. Is still the game plan for clickers. Katie Bresnick, please.
Just a comment for the parsimonious kind of summary of our thoughts on here. I don't necessarily agree with the last bullet, as we talked about with letting the meeting decide, because I think it's really hard for the meeting to decide. So I wouldn't really support having that guidance on here, but I don't think it's worth, if we're not having a motion, I don't think it's worth discussing any further.
Okay, good, thank you.
I agree with Katie.
Good, thank you. So that was,
This is the last bullet of the last sentence.
I think,
the whole bullet, I
yeah,
Yeah, I
suggest
agree.
removing.
good, all right. Well, thank you for that. That was a bit more contentious than I expected. And I appreciate the discussion. And we put it to rest. I'm gonna skip over, let me just think for a second. So this item is about, do we wanna look for a home rule petition? Really, do we wanna look for a home rule petition to support local ballot questions? Which would be the mechanism for, the New Hampshire SB two, the stuff that DNOs have moved for? Or do we wanna look for a potential ballot question around, looking for the slide. I'll look for a potential ballot question around a recall, a potential ballot recall. I think, do we have any real interest in either of these items in terms of something that we want to support as a committee?
I think we have to have a full discussion on it, because it was one of the three articles that was referred to the
Right.
committee at last year's town meeting. So it's not clear to me, like, what's the difference between a local ballot and an Australian ballot?
Same thing, private ballot, that's all.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then what is a recall? I don't know what that is.
So the recall would be, a couple of towns have this, Hopkinton and Longmeadow. If I get it right, that if something passes, a certain category of motion passes a town meeting, it can go to, that motion can go to a ballot for a recall. If there's a high enough number, percentage of voters on the petition for it.
And so that's the first explanation I've heard. But anyways,
One
I
second,
think we should have a meeting, doesn't have to be now or before the select board, but sometime before we make our final report, to discuss this whole thing and come up with a motion or not. But at least have a full discussion so we all understand what's the Australian ballot, local ballot, and recall, and any other things that were within the scope of that article that was referred to us last year.
So we had a discussion at the previous meeting, I was a brief around that as well.
Yeah, very brief, like 10 minutes or 5 minutes.
Sure,
No, I think we need to have a whole meeting on it. Just we owe it to the people that submitted the petition last year. And we owe it to the overall meeting, just like, I know we had a brief discussion of having a representative town meeting too, but I think that nobody minds that, nobody's proposing that.
Mhm.
But there are people proposing this, some version of this, so I think we owe them a meeting. It wouldn't be much, but after the new year, have a meeting on this topic,
okay.
come up with what our recommendation is.
So I'd like to come back to that with you one to one. I think, I'll ask you to go through the material that we had in the previous meeting and review that discussion. And the question would be, before we spend time on it again, what new information do we need and what new discussion do we need to have?
No,
So let's come back to that.
I fear that if we don't have a discussion, we'll be accused of, we just gave short shrift 10 minutes to this topic and just, basically didn't discuss it.
Any other discussion on that question? Let me go to Katie online, please.
Yeah.
Katie, please.
I was gonna say, as someone who I'm interested in this being a potential approach, I thought the discussion last week was sufficient, knowing that we can't necessarily pursue both doing a local ballot or Australian ballot and remote participation, both of which are different concepts. The Australia ballot being something that would be more of a long shot to actually achieve than remote voting. And so I supported going in support of remote voting over this approach. And I thought that seemed like the consensus of the committee at the last meeting. So I think that was sufficient, but open to discussion.
All right, Parashar, thank you. Parashar, please.
Yep, thank you, Eric. So I missed last week's meeting. So if it was discussed, great. But in my mind, I don't think I've actually seen a calendar, if you will, that would lay out the timetable for town meeting, ballot followed by certain time, whatever the results are, and then incorporating into a budget that starts July 1st fiscal year. Because for me, the practical mechanisms of actually making this work outweigh this notion of, do you second guess what happens at town meeting? And given the calendar right now, I don't know that it can work without creating extra havoc on the part of the town and the schools. Have we actually seen that laid out by either ourselves or proponents of how this would mechanically work on a calendar?
I remember at the hearing for this article, when it was presented for the first time, there were a lot of questions about that, and the town clerk was able to address some of them, but it sounded, as your point is, it sounded very complex.
Yeah, and that's
There
why,
could be amendments on the floor, and then how do you get them, they gotta have the ballot printed, and then, the time window it wasn't as straightforward as just every motion that goes into the warrant goes on the ballot, and then you do that, right? Do you remember the discussion at all?
Yeah, I'm sorry, may I? Okay.
Oh, please.
And
Yeah.
there's, there's a white paper on it that the Mass Moderators Association
Right.
did, which the committee has and is in our research folder, and, there's really a number of complexities associated with it, and one of the unintended consequences is that you end up with a tremendous drop off in people who actually attend the deliberative session, and there a handful of people can amend the original proposal that's in the warrant, and the amended version is what ends up on the ballot. So it's had a kind of backwards
Sure.
impact. And then the other really interesting issue is that as soon as you have issues on a ballot instead of at town meeting, all the state campaign finance laws
Kick in,
come
yeah.
into effect, which they don't on if citizens are wanting to
Mhm.
lobby each other for
Mhm.
particular outcomes on town meeting warrant articles. There's no campaign finance issues, but there are, once you have the ballot involved. So it is very complicated, and it would require a pretty substantial overhaul
Good.
of state law to allow us to do it.
Good, thank you. I mean, at a previous meeting when we spent time on this, and we concluded that we weren't ready to vote on it. Phil, I think you would say that we're still not ready to vote on it.
Right, so, I agree with all of them, but I'm not in favor of this, I don't think there's any chance I would be persuaded
All
to
right.
be in favor of it. But I just think in order to make this decision, our job was to handle these questions, and so our job is to give it a full hearing, and
Yeah.
so, we should have the people that wanna do it, answer the questions that Carmen just raised, that
Mhm.
Kristen just raised, and see what they have to say. And then after that, we've had a full and fair hearing, and now we've decided we can't recommend it for the practical reasons.
Good. Please wait. Can you do something?
Yeah, I would agree that we should have an agenda item on an agenda that has other agenda items. I don't want to devote an entire meeting, we've got too much to do. And this is one of the topics that we need to address. And that a prism for me that I'm looking for, again, the values that I stated earlier. This to, if we are trying to encourage more people to come to town meeting. And then at the end, we're saying, oh, doesn't matter what you vote at town meeting, because we're gonna have all of your work undone. By requiring it go to a ballot, which the town clerk tells me, I met with her today, would be 25 pages long.
Yeah.
And unworkable, so let's focus, I do want to hear the specifics of what the timetable would look like, because in my gut, I'm confident that we won't be able to set a tax rate on time, we won't be able to get the business of the town done by adding this level that no one else, no other open town meeting has. Representative town meetings have a very limited, under the state law, they have a very limited number of purposes for which you can have a petition to undo it. Apparently in BTA communities is one of them, since the Milton representative town meeting approved it and the voters undid it, fine. No budget went no tax went unset, no amount of, no annual budget didn't get adopted because of that requirement, and I would fear for just those things, under this proposal, we would cease to function as a town. While we're also telling town meeting voters don't bother to come because the decision will get made.
As a matter of fact, as I understand it, I
So-
thought that the proposal for the Australian ballot is you don't even vote at town meeting. You hear the issues, but then the vote takes place afterward. I don't know, is that the way it is, or do you have?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Mm.
We spent time in this previous meeting. I prepared a brief around this topic. I'm prepared, and the petitioner that put this on the citizen Dinos, right, was here for the previous meeting. So he was here for our discussion as well. So I feel like we've done our job in consideration of this. I don't hear anybody in the room or online who's interested in investing further in this. I wanted to put this on our agenda tonight to see if we're ready to put it to bed, or if we're simply ready to sort of not invest further. The alternatives were, the New Hampshire SB2, that style investment, or do we invest in a limited recall, a limited recall home rule petition, which would be simply a charter change for us, and there's precedent in the state. It's a lower investment in terms of effort, in terms of moving that forward. We haven't really talked about that, and I'm also looking at time tonight. So I'm prepared to move on. I think the question to address is, we can talk about it, right, is have we done enough on this? In my judgment, we've done more than enough. I'm really happy to move on. Better be really quick, Eric.
It is, and it is. I strongly agree with you
Okay.
that we have, this is a huge thing with unintended consequences. There's not a powerful push for it, and I believe that under Eric's leadership, we have given enough and given a lot. And as you say, I mean, part of the problem is there's 2 or 3 different versions of it. But I don't think I think we should sort of affirmatively say, we're not recommending this. I think put it aside.
Okay, so, do we need to vote on that, or I'm just reading the room, I think we're done, so.
I think we could, vote that we would not include this as a recommendation, Australian ballot as a recommendation in our.
I think we have to vote on
I'd
it at some
second
point.
Good,
Yeah, I second.
That's part of our job, is to vote on this.
okay, so a quick motion. Okay, we'll come back to a quick vote, I'm looking at the agenda tonight as well,
Okay.
but clearly, we're, okay. So, we had a really reasonable question about a proxy voting. I did some research, it's not easy. So I don't see an opportunity, for us to invest here. Without further discussion, we move into the discussion of spring and fall town meeting.
Wait, real quick,
Sorry,
Katie was the one that had significant interest in proxy voting. Is there anything else that you would want to have known besides
No.
kind of? Okay.
Yeah, thank you for calling it out, Eric. I chatted with him. I just sent him an email about this, but I didn't realize it would require a home rule petition. I thought of this as kind of a stopgap measure before remote voting was possible. So thank you to Eric for putting in the work to lay this out, and apologies for the misunderstanding.
Yeah, and thank you, Kristen. Thank you. So spring and fall town meeting, Keith, I took your slides and just split the first one up so it's a little easier to see.
Oh, sure, okay.
Would you like to talk us through this?
How does this slide? Oh, I see, you added number 1 and then number 2.
Right, so let me just show you actually, sorry, reading view. So this is this is the first half of your slide? This is the
Okay,
second.
and then,
Yeah.
other,
Yeah.
okay. All right, very good. One of the top 7 survey says, one of the top 7 results was that people were interested in seeing 2 shorter town meetings rather than one long annual town meeting. So in testing that, I went through an outline that I had first proposed in a memo to the committee back in June. There were 3 ideas that I had come up with. Spring and fall town meetings was one, having a consolidated book that went to the voters before town meeting with the article and the recommendations and the motions and the explanations was another. And the third was a call of the articles where the voters decided what goes on the consent calendar. The third one, we don't need to talk about more. The consent calendar works fine. We dispose of about 50% of the articles that way, and town meeting likes it. And so I wanted, and we're working on, and I'm working with staff on the specifics of what would the book look like, the consolidated guide, and with the finance, chief financial officer last week, town clerk today. I'm be meeting with other staff to go through specifically what that looks like. So I ended up doing a deeper dive on the question of what would a 2 town meetings a year look like? What would it look like to have a town meeting every 6 months, one in the spring and one in the fall? With the idea being that it would accomplish the goal of 2 shorter town meetings rather than one long annual one. So therefore you might have higher turnout on the first night of twice in the year, spring and fall, rather than just once. And if the town established a routine of holding a town meeting every 6 months, I think that would create a climate where everyone in town would know that that's what the routine is. And as major initiatives get worked on and come forward, you can shoot for the annual town meeting, and if you miss it, you don't have to wait a year, that there would be a normal in the normal course of events, that there would be another opportunity 6 months later. Could you go to maybe 2 slides down, because I want to show the calendar. What I ended up doing, I looked back at the last decade to see how often special town meetings were held, and there were 5 separate occasions when special town meetings outside of the annual were held. And in recent memory, the ones in 2023 and 2022, we had January special town meetings, which were essentially single issue town meetings around the middle school building project. And prior to that, pre-COVID, we had a town meeting one October to deal with the W.R. Grace, and then in 2016, we had 2 special town meetings outside of the cycle to deal with other issues that the community had. The rest of the special town meetings that were held were typically what is thought of as a special within the annual, that the setup you do for the annual town meeting, just stay set up and stay one more night. But it occurred to me with the most recent special in the annual, when at the last minute, we had a town department that had not prepared an article for a multi-million-dollar project that they suddenly realized they needed to do. So asked to have a special town meeting to be able to deal with that. Perhaps because they would have had to wait a year to bring it back to town meeting. And while it may not be specifically the case there, if any large department knew that if they just missed town meeting, and they've got something that is very important and needs to come forward to the voters, that they might get another opportunity in 6 months later rather than having to wait a year, especially where in our record, we've had a number of significant special town meetings where you had to incur the cost to set it up, and if it costs $90,000 or whatever it is, we've incurred that cost not infrequently. And so we might want to think about that not being a roadblock to getting the work of the town done by having more opportunities for the voters to weigh in on important matters. Connected with that, so let's go back one more. So just some things I wanted to mention. I think that having the two regular meetings would reduce the likelihood of any single issue special town meetings coming up elsewhere, because because there would be, everyone would know, all the town boards and committees would know, and the departments, that there is a routine opportunity in the spring and fall to bring it forward. So don't think if we forgot about you at the annual, then you've got to, you can pick some other time of the year that we weren't planning on having a town meeting. From meeting, no, I'm still on that page. From meeting with the town clerk, I wanted to add that in selecting town meeting dates, it will be important for the town to consider the election timelines that present themselves, particularly if debt exclusions, Prop 2.5 or overrides are sought, because that is the one reason for which a town meeting, and to my understanding, the only reason that a town meeting vote would be subject to a plebiscite at the ballot, if it was a debt exclusion or an override from Prop 2.5. And that's what happens with the major building projects. So having a town meeting on any building project that's to be funded by borrowing with the debt service would be exempt from 2.5. That invites a town election as well. And there are opportunities to think about timing. If it's a fall town meeting in an even numbered year, there happen to be two state elections in September and November, which could serve as a place where an election could occur. If it's in the spring, it needs to be more mindful of the election, I'm told, of the election timelines that we now have to go with, because there's 35 days required in advance in order to put explanations of what a yes and no vote means. That adds time to the process. Ultimately, it may even mean that the town should consider having having the annual town election after town meeting rather than before town meeting. If you otherwise, if you have an annual town meeting vote needing a ballot question, and you didn't put it on the ballot, then you have yet another special town election. It would be important, and what was at the bottom of that page that I hit?
Hearings.
Yeah, and so the spring town meeting must adopt the budget because the law says so. So the budget has to be adopted sometime in the months of February through June. And there's no other time to adopt the annual operating budget for the coming year. Another idea about what a fall town meeting might be able to uniquely do, and it is to where if we are filing home rule petitions and you vote them in And if we had had a special town meeting this fall, we could have revoted a number of the whole rule petitions that we could have submitted for January start of the new legislative session. So it's simply something that you could do. Otherwise, you file it late. We're gonna be, any home rule petitions we file next year will be filed very, very late because we're not even going to town meeting until June to ask for permission. And then any other articles, zoning or general bylaws, or major building projects, or even other financial articles could go to either a spring or fall town meeting as those initiatives become right. In some communities, they actually have in their charters that the fall town meeting would be for zoning bylaws. That's an idea. But it's not, I'm not making that specific recommendation, but it is a framework that others have. For either the annual or the special town meeting, this would be a place where we would use what we can call a briefing book or a comprehensive set of recommendations that includes a document that is sent out to all voters 14 days prior to town meeting with the articles, motions, recommendations, explanations, and fiscal impact, which would be sent out to all households. One way to accomplish that is, I would submit, is by having earlier in the process, having town council review not just the articles, but the motions prior to the close of the warrant, so that as we have public hearings, we can, and get input, we can know and help educate people on why they should vote yes or no on the matter that's coming before them. They are not voting on the article, they're voting on the motion. So I think it's important to identify the motions much earlier in the process that we do now. In some cases, we're not identifying the motions for the voters until the day of town meeting, which seems to be, which is much too late.
Can you say that again? They're not voting on the motion or?
They're not voting on the article, they're voting on the motion. The article is the scope of the potential things you might vote on. The motion is the specific thing you're voting on. If well-written, the article, but if the most well-written motion I can think of is, I move that the town vote to approve the article as printed in the warrant. But that requires that you actually finalize your motion when you post the article, that you're not, having a broad subject matter, but have in fact got the precise proposal that you want to have. That's the point I was making about the, even home rule petition, that I'd like to vote on the home rule petition article by moving the article as printed in the warrant. Okay, next, this is really in the weeds, but it's important. Even going to that briefing book poses a couple of questions. Does that mean that we have to send out a document twice that has the warrant in it? And and I'm hoping the town council can opine that the answer would be no. I'm hoping that, and I read through there are two bylaws, there's a town meeting notice bylaw and a finance committee bylaw that would rule the town meeting notice bylaw. So there's a copy of the warrant of any town meeting shall be sent by mail or otherwise to every household in Concord. All right, I would submit and that a legal ad in the Concord Bridge, which gets delivered to all households in Concord with, if it had, on maybe could be 6 to 8 pages, might have, and a legal ad would be the town meeting warrant. Many communities don't send the entire warrant in a booklet out to their voters, that it's posted in the newspaper. Here we have the great advantage that our newspaper, our hometown newspaper, is by their admission sent to all households in town. So perhaps that would get the information out legally and informatively, be posted in the newspaper, it would be posted on the town meeting, on the town website, but you wouldn't have to send out a document. Instead, the focus of the work of the staff would be on the second document, the new document with the articles, recommendations, explanations, fiscal impact, and would include the finance committee's report, and which could depending upon what works best for the publication, could be an executive summary of the report, could go into a deeper dive on particular issues, but that if there's a fuller, longer report from FinCom, that could be posted on the website. So
Thank you. I'm gonna cut in.
Yeah.
I think, so thank you for your work on this. I think, what I hear is that this can work. It takes some engineering, but it can work. We see it in other towns as well. I want to, so my thought is in going to the select board is to ask them to consider this, to be informed by the work that you've done. And one second, and to treat it as admissible. And, we benefit by being able to make a case for it, both in terms of, so from the sort of the town perspective, the work of doing public administration with boards and committees, and as well, what the benefit for the public would be, right? So in the survey, people voted for it because, I could have 2 shorter meetings, or that was they asked, right? So there's some public support and some public awareness for it. Let me go to Carmen, and then I have a question. So Carmen and then Eric, and then I have a question for you about costs. Okay. Carmen, please.
Yeah, so, I think there's a strong case for 2 meetings, for lots of the reasons that Keith said. However, every town is different, and Concord's got its own traditions and processes which are pretty deeply ingrained. I've been intimately part of those processes for the last 15 years. So a couple things. One concern that is voiced about special town meetings is that we really pride ourselves on a cohesive budgeting process that happens once a year, so you capture everything. And so both the town budgets and the school budgets are, there's nothing piecemeal coming in randomly at different times. You actually have to do the whole budgeting process, think of everything, and put it all in there. And many towns don't do it that way. And if you're not ready with something, then you call a special, maybe you call 4 specials. There are towns that do that, right? And we have never done it that way, so that will be a concern.
This would be a cultural change.
It would be a big cultural change, so it would be a concern though, that if you're gonna put the budgeting, you're gonna have a Springtown meeting, it's gonna deal with the budget. It's really gonna deal with everything, and people won't get lazy and begin to say, well, you know what, it's such a pain in the neck to get all this stuff ready for this deadline. If I don't miss the deadline, I'll just throw this in the special in the fall. So that would be a downside if that happens, because I think it's a big plus for us that we are pretty disciplined in our budgeting, and it's one of many things that helps us keep our AAA bond rating. And it also helps people know what to expect in their tax rate, and I don't know how the finance committee does its job, if it, when you're doing these projections and so forth, so that's an important thing. With respect to timing with the election calendar, I know that the clerk is very, very, very allergic to trying to run a local election and a state election simultaneously, especially now that there is such an extended period of early voting as well as mail-in voting, and they don't, it's just so hard for them. So I think the preference in the clerk's office is gonna be, if we have to have a debt exclusion vote, or we have to have a Proposition 2.5 override, or we've got some weird article marijuana exclusion, or whatever it is that has to go to the polls, that's gonna be a special town election, or it's gonna get rolled in to the annual town election. And one big issue is citizen petitions. There is a different signature threshold for special town meetings. For citizen petitions, it's 100 signatures, whereas it's only 10 for the annual town meeting. And if one of your goals is to kind of more evenly distribute things, if those thresholds are different, it's not gonna work.
Sure.
Because all the citizen petitions are still gonna bunch in the first one. So an interesting thing to think about is whether would we wanna look for special legislation to make the thresholds the same? So that there was no incentive to go to one or the other, and would 100 signatures in a town of 14,000 registered voters be unreasonable? For a citizen petition threshold, just interesting question. And with respect to cost, historically, we have never had much turnout at a special town meeting.
Sure.
Except for the school construction, we'll get one of those, we'll get a really big turnout. So normally with a special town election, we've just used the auditorium in the high school, it has 600 seats. It's
Right.
usually adequate,
Right.
and it basically costs us nothing, because, it costs us the printing and whatever, police time and overtime for staff and so
Sure.
forth. But we don't rent anything, we don't, because all the technology is in there, the screen is in the ceiling, we don't rent a chair, we don't have to, we don't have to
20,
really.
30K, I mean,
Yeah, so I've been looking into the budgets for the last couple of years. We switched accounting systems last year, so it doesn't have all of our historic data in it. But I just asked for, I think, 2022 and 2021, because the last 2 years I've been here, we've had special town meetings, one of them being the middle school one, and the budget was more than maxed out. But I think we need to look at some of these other years where it was a special town meeting that might have just been in the auditorium. We weren't renting AV, but the 2 that I've been here, we've been renting everything for both of them.
Well, and of course, one of those was during COVID,
Sure.
and we knew we needed all that space to spread people out, and, so, yeah.
so,
But if I might, just 2 more points, I know I'm taking a lot of time here, but, on the timing of motions, Keith, historically, the hearing process in our town has changed the shape of how things get moved. And so you almost can't, we do have a lot of articles that get moved as printed in the warrant, that's certainly true. But things that are bigger changes and perhaps more controversial, and especially citizen petitions, they tend to get shaped through that hearing process, as even the zoning bylaws get changed through that process as people hear concerns, issues that are brought up. Zoning can be very complicated and people miss things, and, the questions get asked about, well, does that mean I can put a food truck in my driveway and leave it there for 365 days, so, you get those kinds of questions, and then you'll have a change in how the motion is moved. So that's a hard thing to do, to make the motions that early, I think, but I love Keith's idea of sending the warrant out in the bridge.
Mhm.
The bridge goes right now to every household. If we put the whole warrant in the bridge, that would cost way less than mailing it, printing it and mailing it to every house. And then you've met the bylaw. And then later, you could send that briefing book that would have the whole warrant.
Yeah.
And you're only doing one printing
Yeah.
and one mailing. I think it's a wonderful idea.
yeah, thank you.
I'll stop now.
I'm gonna wait to recognize you. Keith, I really like this work. I think that a recommendation from the committee would be, I think what I'm framing as the ask for the select board is, hey, take a serious look at this. We've started looking at it. When our recommendation is we should really investigate it. I think, again, because it's a cultural change, there's a lot of moving parts. And so it would mean that, different, we'd all have to coordinate, or the different elements of the town would need to coordinate, but that it's promising. Do we?
Yeah, if I could, I just want, I'd say, for me, the most, forget about how easy it is to dive in and then get lost in the weeds on the mechanics of setting up the town meetings. The bottom line for me, and what started it, is our survey says that people want 2 shorter town meetings rather than 1 long one. Well, this is what the framework looks like, and these are some of the questions that would need to be answered in order to see if that's a viable option or not. I think it would be worth exploring and and would feel good about having encouragement from the select board to continue to explore that, how that sentiment of our survey recipients might be able to be addressed.
Good, thank you. Eric, very briefly, please.
Yeah, I'm, like everybody, Keith, I think I'm deeply grateful for the work and the thought that you have put into this. My interpretation for that coming in, you know, the top half dozen was really more a cry for help. People feel that the current town meeting is too long, too burdensome, too inefficient and all that. And so at a high level, I'm in favor of our really focusing in on everything we can to make the one meeting better and more efficient.
That's a yes and, Eric.
Yeah, well, it is, but there are 3 affirmative reasons why I would personally not vote to recommend that the select board look at it further. The first is everything having to do with town meeting is an enormous burden on town staff and on the committees, the finance committee, the 5 public hearings. I mean, it's a huge operation. And the thought of putting everybody through that twice, it's more than just a cultural change.
Do you think it's worth learning more before we say no?
Well, the second reason is I'm worried about the law of unintended consequences, that when having a firm deadline means to the zoning board, to the CPC, to everybody else, gotta get it done. And I worry that, as Carmen was saying, as you get down the home stretch, there's so many reasons to say, oh, well, we just can't do it now. So all these things start flopping over into, and the third reason is the pure sort of logistics. We have one reason why town meeting this year is so late is because of difficulty of getting, you know, the school auditorium and things like that. And there are all those practical scheduling and cost factors. And I think as was said, this is not like a special town meeting where it's just really come in and we're gonna have 600 people in the auditorium and vote on the middle school or whatever. I think that one was a big.
Good, thank you. And I think to button that is there are definite engineering challenges that go along with the design. Good, thank you. I want to recognize Katie Bresnick and then Parashar, please.
Thank you. Also wanted to say thanks to Keith for putting in all this work to kind of think about the logistics. I definitely also appreciate Eric's concerns about this, but I do think this is one area that might help parents quite a bit. The current method of town meeting meeting 3 nights in a row for many hours is almost impossible for parents to attend, especially those with small children. Splitting it up. So like for me, for example, I probably wouldn't be able to get a babysitter for my husband and I to both go for 3 nights in a row. But if there were 2 meetings separated, I could easily get a babysitter for both my husband and I to go to meeting. And if those meetings were each 1 night instead of multiple nights, I'd be able to attend all of the town meeting, which would be great. Although I do appreciate the logistical challenges, and I think it will be important to think through, but I think it's worth exploring this further.
Good, thank you, Katie. Parashar, please.
Yeah, I first of all, thank you, Keith, because many towns do manage this, right? And I think it's something for us to think about. I'm wondering whether a possible compromise or step, other towns in the survey that we sent out actually separate out town meetings. So they've got some, you know, financial stuff on one night and then non-financial items on another night. At least one of the towns separates it by a week. So I'm wondering, can we take a baby step where you don't do all of the items over 6 months, you know, every 6 months, but have the financial items be one night, hopefully, followed a week later. And I understand there's the logistical issues with the school and all that and the equipment, but I think that's a minor thing we can overcome, frankly, and have the second session a week later. for the non-financial items. See what type of audience we get, see what type of participation we get. While we then also work to kind of explore this notion of actually doing it every 6 months. So I thought.
Sure. Yeah, so that's interesting, thank you, I'm sorry to jump in, I think I'd like to follow up with Shannon, not in the meeting, but I'd like to follow up with Shannon. Around sort of à la carte pricing in town meeting, and just understand sort of what it means to sort of mix and match that way, if that's okay.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
I know it's possible because I think that's how some representative town meetings do it.
Mhm.
You know, it's not every single night straight for some of them,
Yeah.
so.
Even some of the open ones, Shannon, in the survey that we sent out, at least 1 or 2 of them separated out.
Okay,
So I'm gonna move forward, I think, sorry, Katie, I need to move forward before we end at 9. Next week at the select board, sharing a 25-minute agenda, with, Amalia, McCaffrey, who's gonna take half of that on clickers. The key comment I got from, speaking with the chair of the select board is, what do we want from them? For them, nothing more than a 1-page executive summary, that's what people have time to read. So select board asks, I think, you know, a sponsor or a kickoff or warrant article around remote participation. I think another question is, how are we gonna organize that? How will Concord, is it the select board, is it our committee, is it something else, a task force? How are we gonna lead that program? What's the project look like for that home rule petition? I think, you know, we did not make a decision tonight about moving forward with a limited recall, a home rule petition, so it'll be off. You know, given Keith's research, I think to ask the select board to begin to consider regular spring and fall town meetings in time for town meeting 26. And again, I think we'll offer that we're happy to work with the select board as they see fit towards investigating that. A couple of things. One is to consider a policy or practice that more readily accommodates the public's interest in selective attendance. This is the marquee item stuff. And to my understanding right now, and you will clarify, is that the moderator should have flexibility to schedule articles for high interest independently of the order in the warrant. I know.
She already does.
You talk about it, but do you have the decision-making authority to do that? Totally. Done deal, all right.
Yeah, for high interest, yeah.
For high
absolutely.
interest, right,
Yeah.
so designation of high interest belongs to the moderator, and scheduling of high interest belongs to the moderator.
Yes.
And that's why we're having this conversation. And then, are there any policy or practice changes to consider relative to the determination of the initial consent calendar?
You know, if the advice of the committee is, be more aggressive in the use of the consent calendar, I have no problem doing that.
Okay.
You know, there is pushback in some places, for example, let's take the Community Preservation Act, okay?
Yeah.
That's an article that takes a long time in its presentation, there's usually like 15 projects, and there's
Right.
slides for each one, and then,
Right.
okay, and then there'll be questions and conversation and so forth. It almost passes unanimously unless there's like one project that people are concerned about, but that's a separable thing.
Right.
It's really easy to pull that one thing out and say, we're gonna vote on that separately. So during COVID, we put the Community Preservation Act on the consent calendar. But I know the Community Preservation Committee didn't like that, because town meeting is their opportunity to
Sure.
make the case for the value of the community preservation. It's another tax that
Absolutely.
we pay.
Yeah.
And it's open to us at some point to repeal that tax, and they really want people to know,
Mhm.
look at all this great stuff we're doing. And no one is gonna know about it unless they feel is gonna know about it unless they make this presentation.
Got
So am I gonna put that on the consent calendar or not?
Right.
So,
Is that your decision? I mean, it's a
Well,
public decision.
Well,
You know, we
so
can-
subject to the voters going one.
yeah, subject to any 10 voters saying, you know, take
We
that
wanna
off,
take
we
it
wanna
off.
talk about it.
Good, okay.
Yes,
So you have the authority, the moderator.
Yeah.
Has the authority that the moderator
Yeah.
needs in both those points. Is there anything else that we wanna ask the select board for, next week?
I just think the 2 votes that we've made on clickers and on remote participation. Get them, make sure that they all are on board, nobody has a serious concern. You
Yeah,
don't have to vote,
Right,
They just have to say, somebody has to say, well, I'm concerned, just so we know.
right,
But it's really just a progress report to me.
Yes, it should be a progress report.
it will be,
And
yeah.
I think we haven't really, although I think we've done a good job with due diligence for the 3 articles that, came after last town meeting. We haven't really talked about really shortening the meeting or addressing like the biggest things, which is like, it's too long, it's too late. So I would say those are things that are to come, so.
Sure,
Like, we'll have some recommendations, like be more aggressive with the consent calendar,
right,
including Community Preservation Act. But those are the kind of things we can do after we get these, kind of 3 formal things that we have to vote on.
Mhm.
Because they were referred to us. And between now and whenever we issue our report in February or whenever that is, we'll have some more specific recommendations on shortening town meeting, including whether we want to further study 2 separate town meetings.
But we're changing the location or start date. Start time, not start date, but like day of the week type thing.
I was struck just on the chart, little chart I prepared, we've met on weekends for our annual town meeting for half of the annual town meetings in the last 10 years.
the voters were pretty negative about that in the survey.
Very.
So,
Well, I have some
yeah.
information.
so we have 20 seconds, so, another tough meeting, guys. So, thank you. I think, I will prepare a progress report for the select board that, more or less follows this outline. Really dialed into how to make meetings shorter, streamlining. And that we've done our work or doing our work on the stuff that we were charged with. Again, when we meet again in 2 weeks, I think, how do we shape the work ahead is a really good topic. So thank you.
So there's a meeting in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Oh,
for us, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I wrote down the next meeting was January 9th.
No, it's a December.
December 9th, I think it is
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, 2 weeks, too much, okay. So with that, it's 9 o'clock and I say thank you and declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everyone.